Welcome back, everyone. You're now watching part 2 of the story. Sir, can you be my husband for one day? Black maid request, melted single mafia boss. Before we continue, make sure you've seen part 1 so you don't miss any of the twists that led us here. Trust me, you'll want the full picture before this part unfolds. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more incredible stories on the way. And while you're here, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far this community reaches around the world. All right, let's get into it. The story continues right now. Juliana woke to the smell of coffee and the unsettling realization that she'd slept better in a fake husband's hotel suite than she had in months in her own apartment. Morning light filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the room in shades of gold that seemed too beautiful for the anxiety currently eating her alive. The reunion started at noon. She had approximately 3 hours to transform into the kind of woman who could believably be married to Gabriel Corsetti. A soft knock at the connecting door made her jump. "Juliana, I'm ordering breakfast. Preferences?" Gabriel's voice was muffled but polite, like this was a normal Saturday morning routine they'd performed 100 times. She cracked the door open. He stood in the living room wearing gray slacks and a white t-shirt that had no right to look that expensive, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked unfairly put together for someone who'd probably been awake for hours coordinating whatever mob bosses coordinate on Saturday mornings. "Coffee," she said, "and anything. I'm too nervous to have preferences." His eyes swept over her, taking in her rumpled pajamas and sleep-mussed hair, and something almost soft crossed his face. "You look human. It's reassuring." "As opposed to what?" "As opposed to the terrified employee I picked up yesterday." He moved to the room service menu on the coffee table. "I'll order a variety. You should eat, even if you don't think you can. Low blood sugar makes bad decisions feel reasonable." Juliana emerged fully from her room, drawn by the coffee pot that sat on the kitchenette counter like a beacon of hope. She poured a cup, doctored it with cream and sugar, and took a sip that tasted like it cost more per ounce than her regular bodega coffee. "Your security team," she said, because focusing on logistics was easier than focusing on her mounting panic. "Been here since 4 a.m. 3 in the lobby, 2 monitoring the reunion venue, 1 tracking Terrence Jenkins's current location." Gabriel said it like he was discussing restaurant reservations. "He's at your cousin's apartment. They've been there since last night." "You're having him followed?" "I'm having everyone followed." Gabriel looked up from the menu. "Your grandmother, your Aunt Patricia, your Uncle Jerome, 17 cousins, and approximately 35 extended family members and family friends." "That's..." Juliana searched for words. "Incredibly invasive?" "That's thorough." He picked up the hotel phone and ordered what sounded like half the breakfast menu. When he hung up, he turned to her with an expression that was part amusement, part exasperation. "Juliana, I don't do anything without information. It's not paranoia when people actually want you dead. 3 families would celebrate if I disappeared. The Valentinos are just the most aggressive currently." "And you think Terrence is connected to them?" "I think Terrence Jenkins was in prison with Marco Valentino's nephew. I think he was released 3 months early through legal maneuvering that has the Valentino family's fingerprints all over it. And I think it's extremely convenient that he's suddenly very interested in meeting your new husband." Gabriel moved closer, his expression serious. "I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm trying to prepare you. If today goes sideways, you follow my lead immediately. No questions, no hesitation." Juliana's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "You think something's going to happen?" "I think it's possible, which is why we're going to be smart." He reached out, his fingers gentle as they tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. The touch was probably meant to be reassuring, but it sent electricity down her spine. "But we're still going. You deserve to face him with your head high. We're just going to do it carefully." The certainty in his voice steadied something in her chest. This was insane, all of it, but if she had to do something insane, at least she was doing it with someone who planned for every contingency. Breakfast arrived in a procession of covered dishes that turned the suite's dining table into a buffet. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, pastries, pancakes, and things Juliana couldn't identify but that smelled amazing. She picked at a croissant while Gabriel ate with the efficient focus of someone fueling up for battle. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said between bites. "The real story, not the summary." Juliana smiled despite herself. "Deanna Brooks. Everyone calls her Grandma D. She raised me after my parents died when I was 12. Car accident on I-95. She owned a soul food restaurant in Savannah for 30 years before selling it when she turned 75. She's tough, smart, and can read people like they're wearing their secrets on their foreheads." "So she'll know we're not really married?" Gabriel said. "Probably, but she'll also play along if she thinks it's what I need." Juliana took a sip of coffee. "She's the only person who never made me feel less than. When Terrence left me for Shanice, everyone else was full of 'I told you so' and 'maybe if you'd tried harder.' Grandma B just showed up at my apartment with wine and told me any man stupid enough to leave me wasn't worth the energy of my tears." "I like her already," Gabriel said. "She'll like you too. Or she'll see right through this and grill you until you confess everything. 50-50 odds, honestly." They spent the next hour reviewing their story again, refining details until it felt almost real. They'd met at a charity gala, hit it off over a discussion of Caravaggio versus Rembrandt. He'd pursued her with the kind of focused intensity he brought to everything. She'd resisted at first, wary of his world, his reputation, but he'd worn her down with what Gabriel called strategic persistence, and what Juliana suspected was actually just stubbornness. "Why did I say yes?" Juliana asked. "When you proposed, I mean. What was my reason?" Gabriel paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. Something shifted in his expression, calculation giving way to something more genuine. "Because I made you feel seen. Because I didn't want you to change or fit into some predetermined mold. Because when you're with me, you don't have to be smaller or quieter or more acceptable." He set down his cup. "That's why you said yes. Because I offered you space to be exactly who you are." The words hung in the air between them, and Juliana felt something crack open in her chest. That wasn't a story for the reunion. That was truth wrapped in fiction, real longing dressed up as pretend motivations. "That's good," she managed, her voice rougher than intended. "Very believable." "I thought so," Gabriel said quietly. At 11 o'clock, Juliana retreated to her room to get ready. The coral sundress fit like it had been made for her body specifically, which it probably had been. It hugged her curves without being tight, fell to just above her knee, and made her brown skin look like it was glowing from within. The sandals were comfortable, despite being designer, and the accessories, delicate gold jewelry that probably cost more than her car, completed the look. She stared at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. This wasn't Juliana Brooks, professional housekeeper who'd learned to make herself invisible. This was Juliana Corsetti, wife of a powerful man, someone who belonged in fancy hotel suites and private planes. It was terrifying how much she didn't hate it. When she emerged, Gabriel was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone who apparently wasn't delivering satisfactory answers. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he was saying died mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he said in English, ending the call without taking his eyes off her. The silence stretched. Juliana resisted the urge to fidget. "You look beautiful," Gabriel said finally, and it didn't sound like a line or a performance. It sounded like an observation that had surprised him. Stunning, actually. "The dress does most of the work," Juliana deflected. "The dress is just fabric. You make it significant." He crossed to her, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something woody and expensive that probably had a name she couldn't pronounce. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Final touch. Inside was a wedding ring, white gold or platinum, with a center diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the room. It was flanked by smaller stones in a setting that was elegant without being ostentatious. It was the kind of ring you gave someone you actually loved. Gabriel, this is on loan, he interrupted, from a jeweler I do business with. You'll return it after next week's dinner. He took her left hand, his touch warm and steady. May I? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The ring slid onto her finger like it belonged there, fitting perfectly. Of course it fit perfectly. Gabriel Corsetti didn't do anything without precision. There, he said, softly, still holding her hand. Now you look married. What about you? Juliana asked, nodding at his bare left hand. Gabriel reached into his other pocket and produced a simpler platinum band. He handed it to her. Would you do the honors? Taking his hand felt more intimate than it should have. His fingers were long, elegant, with calluses she'd never noticed before, evidence of some history she didn't know. The ring slid on smoothly, and suddenly the whole thing felt very, dangerously real. Perfect, Gabriel said, admiring the ring with what looked like genuine satisfaction. Shall we go terrify your ex-boyfriend? The reunion was being held at Grandma Dee's house, a beautiful Victorian in Savannah's historic district with a wraparound porch and a garden that Juliana had spent countless summer days playing in as a child. The town car pulled up at exactly 12:15, fashionably late enough to make an entrance. Juliana could see people milling around the porch and front yard, hear the sounds of music and laughter and the particular chaos of a Brooks family gathering. Her stomach twisted into knots. Remember, Gabriel said quietly as the driver opened their door, you have nothing to prove to these people. You're already better than they deserve. This is just showing them what they were too blind to see. He stepped out first, then offered his hand to help her out, a gesture so natural it could have been habit. Juliana took it, letting him pull her from the car into the humid Savannah afternoon. The conversations on the porch stuttered, heads turned. Juliana watched recognition ripple through her family, not of Gabriel specifically, but of what he represented: money, power, the kind of presence that commanded attention just by existing. Gabriel kept her hand in his as they walked up the front path, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like solidarity. Which one is Terence? He murmured. There, Juliana said, nodding toward the porch where a familiar figure stood frozen. Terence had put on weight in prison. Not muscle, just softness around his middle that the expensive polo shirt couldn't quite hide. He'd always been conventionally handsome in a forgettable way, but time and bad choices had worn him down to something diminished. Next to him stood Shanice, Juliana's cousin, tall and light-skinned with the kind of features that got called exotic by people who didn't know better. She wore a white sundress that screamed, "Look at me," and her left hand was prominently displayed, showing off the engagement ring that Juliana had to admit was impressive. At least until Shanice saw the ring on Juliana's finger, the one that made hers look like costume jewelry. "Oh, this is going to be fun," Gabriel murmured. They reached the porch steps. Juliana's Aunt Patricia, her mother's sister, who'd made passive-aggressive comments about Juliana's life choices for years, was the first to recover. "Juliana, you made it!" The surprise in her voice was barely concealed. "And this must be your husband?" "Gabriel Corsetti," he said smoothly, releasing Juliana's hand only to slide his arm around her waist in a gesture of casual possession. "Pleasure to meet you all. Juliana speaks about her family often." The lie was delivered with such conviction that Juliana almost believed it herself. "Corsetti?" Terence repeated, his eyes narrowing. "That name sounds familiar." "Does it?" Gabriel's smile was polite and dangerous. "I'm an import-export. Perhaps you've heard of my company?" "Maybe." Terence's jaw was tight. "What kind of imports?" "The profitable kind." Gabriel's arm tightened slightly around Juliana's waist, not constraining, just present. "Though I try not to discuss business at social gatherings. It's terribly boring for everyone else." I think it's fascinating, Shanice chimed in, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone trying to insert themselves into a conversation. Juliana never mentioned she was dating anyone, let alone getting married. It all happened so fast. When you know, Juliana said, surprised by how steady her voice was. Why waste time? Indeed, Gabriel said, looking down at her with an expression that made her breath catch. He was good at this. Too good. The way he looked at her felt real enough to make her believe it. Though I admit I pursued Juliana rather aggressively. She made me work for it. I'm sure she did, Terrence muttered, his eyes cold. Before the situation could escalate, a voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. Juliana Marie Brooks! Grandma D emerged from the front door, resplendent in a purple dress that matched her regal bearing. At 80, she was still tall and straight-backed, with hair twisted into an elegant silver crown and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She looked at Juliana, then at Gabriel, then at the way his arm wrapped around Juliana's waist like he had every right to be there. Her eyebrows rose approximately half an inch, which, for Grandma D, was the equivalent of shocked gasping. "So you're the man who married my granddaughter without inviting me to the wedding?" she said, crossing the porch with deliberate steps. Gabriel, to his credit, didn't flinch. He released Juliana and extended his hand. "Mrs. Brooks, Gabriel Corsetti, and you're absolutely right to be upset. It was unconscionably rude of us. I can only plead that we were swept up in the moment, and I was too impatient to wait for proper planning." Grandma D ignored his hand, looking him up and down with the kind of assessment that had made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Impatient. That's one word for it. Then, to Juliana's absolute shock, her grandmother smiled. "Come here, boy." She pulled Gabriel into a hug that would have crushed someone less solid. Over her grandmother's shoulder, Gabriel caught Juliana's eye and winked. When Grandma D released him, she turned to Juliana and mouthed, "We're talking later." Juliana nodded. She'd expected nothing less. "Now, get inside, all of you. Food's getting cold, and I didn't cook for 2 days just to have y'all stand around on the porch gossiping." The family filed inside, and Juliana felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her and Gabriel. Questions were whispered, speculation ran wild. And through it all, Gabriel remained at her side, playing the role of devoted husband with the kind of commitment that method actors look lazy. The dining room table was loaded with enough food to feed a battalion. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, sweet potatoes, and at least 3 different pies. Grandma D had outdone herself, which meant she'd been nervous about this reunion despite her confident exterior. Juliana found herself seated between Gabriel and her Uncle Jerome, with Terrence and Shanice directly across the table. It was like a stage had been set for maximum drama. "So, Gabriel," Uncle Jerome said, loading his plate with chicken, "import-export, that's a broad field. What specifically do you import?" "Luxury goods, primarily," Gabriel said without missing a beat. "Art, wine, specialty items for collectors. There's a significant market for items that are difficult to acquire through conventional channels." It was technically true, if you considered difficult to acquire a euphemism for borderline illegal. "Sounds lucrative," Terrence said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Must be nice being able to afford the finer things. Some of us have to work for our money." The implication that Gabriel had somehow acquired his wealth through luck or inheritance rather than effort hung in the air. "I do work," Gabriel said, "quite hard actually. Though I'll admit I'm fortunate that my work happens to be profitable. Not everyone can say the same." His eyes met Terrence's. "How's your career going? Juliana mentioned you'd had some setbacks recently." Terrence's face flushed. "I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I've got new business ventures, new connections." "Connections are valuable," Gabriel agreed. "Though one should be careful about the company one keeps. Bad associations can be dangerous." The conversation was happening on two levels, the surface discussion about careers and the subtext that crackled with unspoken threats. Juliana felt caught between them, her appetite evaporating. Under the table, Gabriel's hand found hers and squeezed gently. The gesture was hidden from view, but unmistakable in its meaning. "I've got this." "Tell us how you two met," Aunt Patricia said, clearly trying to redirect. "Juliana's been so secretive about her life in New York." "At a charity gala," Juliana said, following into the script they'd practiced. "I was there with a friend from the hospital where she works. Gabriel and I got stuck talking about whether Caravaggio was more technically skilled than Rembrandt." "She argued for Rembrandt," Gabriel added, his smile genuine, "quite passionately. I was impressed by someone who'd actually studied art history rather than just collecting pieces for investment." "Because that's what you do?" Shanice asked. "Collect art for investment?" "Sometimes," Gabriel said, "though I prefer to acquire pieces I find personally meaningful. Investment should be a bonus, not the motivation." It was a subtle dig at people who did things purely for status, which described Shanice's entire approach to life. The meal continued with Gabriel deflecting invasive questions with the skill of a professional diplomat and the patience of a saint. He complimented Grandma Dee's cooking with genuine enthusiasm. He asked Uncle Jerome about his construction business with what seemed like real interest. He even managed to find common ground with Juliana's younger cousins, discussing sports and music with ease. He was, Juliana realized, performing a masterclass in how to navigate hostile social terrain. Every answer was calibrated to reveal nothing while seeming transparent. Every gesture toward Juliana looked natural, a hand on her back, fingers brushing her shoulder, the way he leaned slightly toward her when she spoke, like her words were the most important thing in the room. It should have felt fake. Instead, it felt dangerously close to something she could get used to. After dinner, as people migrated to the porch and backyard, Terence cornered them near the kitchen. "Can I talk to you?" he asked Juliana, his eyes flicking to Gabriel. "Alone?" "Anything you need to say to my wife, you can say in front of me," Gabriel said pleasantly. Terence's jaw worked. "Fine. Juliana, I just want to say, I'm happy for you, really. I know things ended badly between us, but seeing you with someone who can provide for you, it's good." The condescension dripped from every word. The implication that she needed someone to provide for her, that she couldn't manage on her own. "How generous of you," Juliana said, her voice sweet as antifreeze. "And I'm happy for you too, Terence. Shanice seems perfect for you. You both deserve exactly what you've got." The insult sailed over Terence's head, but Gabriel's lips twitched. "Though I have to ask," Juliana continued, feeling bold with Gabriel's presence at her back like armor, "how did you manage to land on your feet so quickly after your release? I know starting over after prison can be difficult." Terence's expression went hard. "I had friends who helped, people who understand that everyone deserves a second chance." "Interesting friends," Gabriel murmured, "the kind who help with early releases and new business opportunities?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Terence stepped closer, his body language aggressive. Gabriel didn't move, but something shifted in his bearing, a subtle recalibration from charming guest to something significantly more dangerous. "It means I'm curious about their connections. Professional interest, you understand. I'm always looking for talented people." "I don't think we run in the same circles," Terence said. "No," Gabriel agreed. "We don't, which is probably for the best." The unspoken threat hung between them. Terence opened his mouth to respond, but Shanice appeared, looping her arm through his possessively. "Baby, your mom's looking for you," she said, then turned to Juliana with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's a gorgeous ring, cousin. Must have cost a fortune." "Gabriel's generous," Juliana said simply. "I'm sure he is." Shanice's eyes were calculating. "You're so lucky, finding someone who can take care of you like that. Not everyone is as fortunate."
The comparison was obvious. Shanice with her moderately successful boyfriend and decent ring versus Juliana with her wealthy, powerful husband and diamond that probably cost more than a car. For 5 years, Juliana had let people like Shanice make her feel small, had let their judgments and comparisons chip away at her self-worth until she'd almost believed she deserved the scraps they thought she rated. Looking at Shanice now, at her expensive dress and forced confidence, and the desperate need for validation that radiated from her like heat, Juliana felt something shift inside her. "You're right," she said softly. "I am lucky. Not because of the ring or the money, but because I found someone who sees me, who doesn't need me to be anything other than exactly who I am." She looked up at Gabriel, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That's worth more than any fortune." "Beautifully said," Gabriel murmured, and the look in his eyes made her forget, just for a moment, that this was all pretend. Shanice's smile turned brittle. She steered Terence away, leaving Juliana and Gabriel alone in the corner of the kitchen. "That was well done," Gabriel said quietly. "You're a natural at this." "At what? Lying to my family?" "At knowing your worth." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so natural it felt rehearsed, except for the way his fingers lingered slightly. "You deserved better than him, Juliana, better than all of them." "Is that part of the act?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel's expression shifted, calculation giving way to something raw. "What do you think?" Before she could answer, before she could examine the flutter in her chest or the way her pulse kicked up, Grandma D's voice cut through the moment. "Juliana, Gabriel, porch, now." They'd been summoned, and from the look on her grandmother's face, the real interrogation was about to begin.
Grandma D's porch had always been her throne room, the place where family business was conducted, truths were extracted, and judgment was passed with the weight of biblical authority. Juliana had spent countless hours on this porch as a child, confessing minor sins and major fears to a woman who never judged harshly but always saw clearly. Now she sat in one of the wicker chairs, Gabriel beside her, while Grandma D settled into her rocking chair with the deliberate movements of someone preparing for battle. "So," Grandma D said, her voice deceptively mild, "you want to tell me what's really going on?" Juliana's carefully constructed story evaporated under her grandmother's knowing gaze. "What do you mean?" "Child, please." Grandma D's laugh was dry. "I've been reading people since before you were born. That man," she nodded at Gabriel, "is many things, but a man in love acts a certain way, and while he's doing an admirable job, there's something just slightly off." Gabriel, to his credit, didn't try to maintain the pretense. "You're perceptive, Mrs. Brooks." "Deanna," she corrected, "and yes, I am. So why don't you tell me the real story before I decide whether to throw you both out of my house or just lecture you for an hour about the importance of honesty?" Juliana looked at Gabriel, panic rising in her chest. They'd prepared for skeptical family members, for invasive questions, but not for complete exposure in the first 2 hours. Gabriel met her eyes, and something passed between them, a question and an answer compressed into a single look. Then he turned to Grandma D with an expression of genuine respect. "Your granddaughter works for me," he said simply, "as an estate manager. We're not married. This is a mutually beneficial arrangement. She needed a partner for this reunion to deal with an ex-boyfriend who's been harassing her. I needed a wife to convince my overbearing mother to stop staging matchmaking ambushes. We agreed to help each other." The silence that followed was broken only by the creak of Grandma D's rocking chair and the distant sounds of the party continuing in the backyard. "Well," Grandma D said finally, "at least you're honest when called out on it. That's something." She turned to Juliana. "And you thought this was a good idea?" "I thought it was a necessary idea," Juliana corrected. "Terence has been texting me for months, Grandma, telling me I'm pathetic, that he dodged a bullet, that I should be grateful he left before wasting more of his time. I just wanted," her voice cracked slightly, "I just wanted to show him he was wrong, that I wasn't pathetic." Grandma Dee's expression softened. "Baby girl, you never needed to prove anything to that fool. Him leaving was the best thing that could have happened to you." "I know that intellectually, but knowing something and feeling it are different things." "True enough." Grandma Dee turned her attention to Gabriel. "And you, Gabriel Corsetti, import-export businessman with enough money to buy custom jewelry for a fake wife and enough power that Terrence Jenkins looked like he wanted to run when he recognized your name. What exactly do you import and export?" "Various commodities," Gabriel said carefully, "some more legal than others." "So you're a criminal?" "I prefer entrepreneur with flexible ethics." To Juliana's shock, Grandma Dee laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. "Lord help me, I like you. You remind me of my late husband. He had that same way of making illegal sound reasonable." She leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Gabriel Corsetti. That boy Terrence isn't just sniffing around because he's curious about Juliana's new husband. He's been asking questions all morning about your business, your connections, your territories. That's not jealousy, that's reconnaissance." "I'm aware," Gabriel said. "I've had people monitoring him since we arrived." "Of course you have," Grandma Dee shook her head. "Which brings me to my question. Is my granddaughter in danger because of this arrangement?" Gabriel's expression went serious. "Not if I can help it. I have security here, discreet but present, and I've already identified Terrence's connections to people who have issues with me. We'll be gone tomorrow, and after next week's event with my mother, Juliana and I will have a quiet divorce, and she'll never have to be associated with my world again." "Except she already is associated with it," Grandma Dee pointed out. "The second you walked into this reunion together, you made her visible to whoever's watching you. You think they won't use her to get to you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Juliana's stomach dropped as she realized her grandmother was right. She'd been so focused on the immediate goal, humiliating Terrence, proving her worth, that she hadn't thought about the longer implications. "I've considered that," Gabriel said quietly, "which is why I'm increasing her security after this weekend. She won't know they're there, but she'll be protected." "For how long?" Juliana asked, finding her voice. "Forever? You're going to have people following me around New York indefinitely?" "Until I'm certain there's no threat," Gabriel said. "I told you, I protect what's mine." "But I'm not yours," Juliana said, frustration bleeding into her voice. "This is temporary, fake. Once we're done, I go back to being your housekeeper and you go back to being my employer, and none of this matters." Something flickered across Gabriel's face, something that looked almost like disappointment before his expression shuddered. "Of course, but until then, you're under my protection, whether you like it or not." Grandma Dee watched this exchange with sharp eyes, then stood with the kind of decisive movement that meant she'd made up her mind about something. "All right, here's what's going to happen. You two are going to continue this charade for today, because backing out now would cause more problems than it solves. You're going to smile and play your parts and make sure Terrence, and whoever he's reporting to, sees exactly what you want them to see." "And what's that?" Gabriel asked.
A united front. A woman who's moved on and up, and a man who's powerful enough that going after her would be stupid. Grandma Dee fixed Gabriel with a look that probably made mobsters confess. "But after today, you're going to have a serious conversation about what this actually means. Because I'm old, not blind, and I can see the way you look at her when you think no one's watching." "Grandma," Juliana started. "Hush, child, I'm talking to him." Grandma Dee didn't break eye contact with Gabriel. "You might have started this as a business arrangement, but somewhere between New York and Savannah, something shifted. Maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, but I noticed. And if you're going to put my granddaughter in danger, even peripherally, you better be damn sure it's worth it." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. She's worth it, Mrs. Brooks. Deanna, whatever this started as, you're right that it's become something more. At least for me. Juliana's heart stopped, restarted, stopped again. Gabriel, she began, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. He turned to face her fully, his cognac eyes intense in the afternoon light. I hired you 11 months ago because you were qualified and discreet. I kept you employed because you were excellent at your job. But somewhere in those 11 months, I started looking forward to the mornings when you'd arrive. Started leaving my office door open so I could hear you moving through the apartment. Started finding excuses to be home when you were working just to have a few minutes of conversation. You never said anything, Juliana whispered. Because you worked for me. Because the power dynamic was inappropriate. Because I'm not the kind of man someone like you should want. His jaw tightened. When you asked me to do this, to pretend to be your husband, I saw an opportunity, not just to solve my mother problem, but to spend time with you outside the employer-employee relationship, to see if what I felt was real or just proximity and isolation. And, Juliana could barely breathe. It's real, Gabriel said simply. Inconvenient, complicated, probably dangerous for both of us, but real. Grandma D made a satisfied sound. Well, that's settled then. Nothing's settled, Juliana protested, her brain struggling to process Gabriel's confession. We can't. You're my employer. She glanced at her grandmother. You're in a complicated profession. I'm just a housekeeper who cleans your floors. You're a woman with a degree in art history who's working a practical job to survive in an expensive city. You're intelligent, observant, kind, and strong enough to ask the most dangerous man in New York to fake marry you out of spite. You're not just anything, Juliana. The words hit her like physical blows, each one dismantling a piece of the armor she'd built around herself since Terrence left. The armor that said she wasn't enough, wasn't special, wasn't worth wanting. This is a lot, she managed. It is, Gabriel agreed, which is why I'm not asking you to decide anything now. We finish today, we do the dinner with my mother next week, and then, once the arrangement is officially over, if you want to explore what this could be, as equals, not as employer and employee, I'd like that chance. And if I don't, Juliana asked, even though her heart was screaming at her brain to shut up. Then you get your $25,000. I arrange for ongoing security to keep you safe from any blowback from this weekend, and we part ways professionally. His expression was carefully neutral. I'm not going to pressure you, Juliana. You've had enough men in your life trying to control your choices. Grandma D stood, brushing off her dress. I'm going back to my guests before they eat all the dessert. You two take the time you need, but remember, everyone's watching. Whatever you're feeling, save the heavy discussion for later. Right now, you're a happily married couple who can't keep their hands off each other. She headed back inside, leaving Juliana and Gabriel alone on the porch, with the weight of unspoken possibilities between them. I don't know what to say, Juliana admitted. Then don't say anything yet. Gabriel stood, offering his hand. Let's go show your ex-boyfriend what he lost. We can figure out the rest later. Juliana took his hand, let him pull her up. But before they went back inside, she stopped him. Gabriel, thank you for being honest. Even if I don't know what I want yet, I appreciate you telling me the truth. Always, he said. Then, with a slight smile, well, mostly. I am a criminal, after all. The joke broke the tension, and Juliana found herself laughing as they rejoined the party. But now everything felt different. Every touch of Gabriel's hand, every casual smile, every protective gesture carried new weight. This wasn't just a performance anymore. It was an audition for something real. The afternoon passed in a blur of relatives, questions, and the careful dance of maintaining their cover while processing Gabriel's confession. Terrence kept watching them from across the yard, his expression growing darker as the hours passed, and Juliana showed no signs of being anything other than blissfully happy. Around 4 o'clock, as the party was winding down, Terrence made his move. He approached while Gabriel was talking to Uncle Jerome about construction projects, catching Juliana alone by the dessert table. "So, this is what you've been doing in New York," he said without preamble. "Sleeping your way up." Juliana's hand tightened around her plate. "Excuse me? Come on, Juliana. A woman like you doesn't land a man like Gabriel Corsetti without putting in work." His smile was cruel. "I always knew you had it in you. Just never thought you'd use it so strategically." The insult was designed to cut, to reduce everything she was to her body and her willingness to use it. 5 years ago, it would have destroyed her. Now, it just made her angry.
"You're right," she said sweetly. "I did put in work. I worked on being someone worth knowing, someone interesting, intelligent, and independent. You should try it sometime. Might help with that personality problem you've developed." Terrence's face flushed. "You think you're better than me now because you found some rich criminal to take care of you? I think I'm better than you because I don't need to tear other people down to feel good about myself." Juliana set down her plate. "You made your choice, Terrence. You left me from my cousin, which says more about your character than mine. Now I've moved on. Be adult enough to accept it." "Moved on?" Terrence laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You haven't moved on. This whole thing, the husband, the ring, showing up here, it's all about me. You're still hung up on what we had." "What we had was one-sided and exhausting," Juliana said. "I spent 3 years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. That's not love. That's not even like. That's me not knowing my worth and you taking advantage of it." She straightened her shoulders. "So thank you, actually. Thank you for leaving. It was the kick I needed to start valuing myself." She turned to walk away, but Terrence grabbed her arm. "We're not done." He didn't get to finish the sentence. Gabriel appeared like smoke, his hand closing over Terrence's wrist with enough pressure to make the other man wince. "Remove your hand," Gabriel said quietly. "Now." His voice was conversational, but there was murder in his eyes. This wasn't the charming businessman who chatted with her family. This was the man who controlled territory and eliminated threats. Terrence let go immediately, stepping back. "We were just talking." "Talking doesn't involve grabbing," Gabriel said. He hadn't raised his voice, but somehow everyone in the immediate vicinity had gone quiet. "I think it's time for you to leave, Mr. Jenkins. The party's winding down anyway." "You don't get to tell me to leave," Terrence said, trying to salvage his pride. "This is Deanna's house." "And Deanna is my grandmother," Juliana interrupted. "Which means when I ask you to leave, you leave. So go, Terrence. Take Shanice, take your wounded ego, and get out." For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then, something in Gabriel's expression, some cold promise, made Terrence back down. He left without another word, collecting Shanice and departing with what little dignity he had remaining. The party atmosphere shifted after that. Other relatives made their excuses, filtering out until only close family remained. By 6 o'clock, it was just Juliana, Gabriel, and Grandma Dee sitting in the living room while Uncle Jerome handled the last of the cleanup outside. "That could have gone worse," Grandma Dee observed, "though I'm not sure how." "I'm sorry," Juliana said. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "Baby, you didn't cause anything. That boy's been looking for a fight all day." Grandma Dee turned to Gabriel. "You handled it well, efficiently. Your father teach you that?" "My father taught me many things, some more useful than others." "I knew a Lorenzo Corsetti once," Grandma Dee said casually. "Back in the 70s. He used to come through Savannah on business. My husband did some driving for his organization before we got smart and left that life." She smiled at Gabriel's expression. "Don't look so surprised. I told you. I've been around. I know what your world looks like." "Did you know my father well?" Gabriel asked, something almost vulnerable in his voice. "Well enough to know he was a hard man. Brilliant strategist. Absolutely ruthless and completely incapable of seeing people as anything other than assets or threats." Grandma Dee's eyes were kind. "You have his intelligence, but not his cruelty. That's good. Means there's hope for you yet." I'm not sure my enemies would agree about the cruelty part. Being willing to be cruel when necessary isn't the same as enjoying it, Grandma D said. Your father enjoyed it. You don't. I can tell. They talked for another hour, about Gabriel's mother, about the business he'd inherited, about the careful balance between power and humanity in a world that rewarded violence. Grandma D asked questions that would have been invasive from anyone else, but somehow felt appropriate from her, and Gabriel answered with a frankness that surprised Juliana. Finally, as the sun was setting and painting the room in shades of orange and gold, Grandma D announced she was tired and heading to bed. "You two staying the night or heading back to New York?" she asked. "We have a hotel, the mansion on Forsyth Park." "Fancy." Grandma D pulled Juliana into a hug. "You be careful, baby girl. And you," she pointed at Gabriel, "you keep her safe from everyone, including yourself." "Yes, ma'am," Gabriel said seriously. They left as twilight was settling over Savannah, the town car gliding through streets lined with historic homes and ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss. Juliana was exhausted, emotionally drained from the performance and the confrontation and Gabriel's confession that kept echoing in her head. "You did well today," Gabriel said as they drove. "Better than well. You were magnificent." "I didn't do anything special," Juliana protested. "You stood up to someone who spent years making you doubt yourself. You faced your family with your head high. You handled Terrence with grace and strength. Gabriel's hand found hers in the space between them. That's everything special, Juliana." Back at the hotel, they retreated to their separate rooms with murmured goodnights. But Juliana couldn't sleep. She lay in the expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day and trying to sort through the tangle of feelings in her chest. Gabriel had feelings for her, real ones, apparently developing over months of proximity and conversation. The idea should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like something slotting into place, an answer to a question she hadn't known she was asking. Because if she was honest, really brutally honest, she'd been half in love with Gabriel Corsetti for months, had told herself it was just admiration for his intelligence or appreciation for his generosity or the natural attraction anyone would feel for a man who looked like he did. But it was more than that. It was the way he respected her boundaries, the way he noticed small things, how she took her coffee, which rooms she cleaned first, when she needed space, the way he never made her feel less than, even though the power dynamic between them was a canyon. She'd been falling for him while telling herself it was impossible, while believing someone like her didn't get someone like him. Except maybe she did. A soft knock at the connecting door made her jump. "Juliana, are you awake?"
She opened the door. Gabriel stood there in sleep pants and a t-shirt, his hair mussed, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much adrenaline from today." He hesitated. "Would you want to sit? Talk? I promise I'm not trying to pressure you about anything. I could use the company." They ended up on the suite's balcony, sitting in cushioned chairs, with Savannah spreading out below them like a jewel box. The night air was warm and heavy with the scent of jasmine. For a while, neither of them spoke, just sat in comfortable silence. "My father used to bring me to Savannah," Gabriel said finally, "when I was young, before I understood what he really did. He'd have meetings here, and I'd stay at the hotel with my mother, and we'd walk through the squares, and she'd tell me stories about the city's history. Those are some of my few good memories of him, before everything else complicated it." "What happened to complicate it?" Juliana asked softly. "I got older, started understanding that the business trips were actually territory negotiations, that the friends he met with were other crime families, that the money that paid for our house and my education came from things that destroyed other people's lives." Gabriel was quiet for a moment. "When I was 16 and he died, everyone expected me to fall apart. Instead, I felt relieved, and then guilty for feeling relieved. It took years to reconcile those feelings." "Do you ever wish you'd chosen differently?" Juliana asked. "Done something legitimate instead of taking over his empire?" "Every day," Gabriel admitted. But I'm also pragmatic. I inherited his organization when I was barely an adult. The choices were take control and try to run it with more humanity than he did, or watch it fracture and see good people get caught in the violence. I chose control. He looked at her. Does that make me irredeemable in your eyes? Juliana thought about it, really thought about it. I think we all make choices based on the options we have. You chose the least bad option available to you. That's not irredeemable. That's human. You're remarkably non-judgmental for someone who should probably be horrified by me. I grew up around men like you, Juliana reminded him. My grandfather drove for your father's organization. I know what that world looks like. I also know the difference between people who do terrible things because they enjoy it and people who do terrible things because they see no better alternative. You're the latter. That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. She drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you said earlier that you'd been noticing me for months, was that true, or was it part of convincing Grandma D? Gabriel turned to face her fully. It was true. Every word. I noticed you, Juliana. The way you hum while you clean. The way you stop to look at the art in my hallway like you're having a conversation with it. The way you rearrange my kitchen, even though I've never mentioned it bothers me. He smiled slightly. The way you never once asked about the blood or the suspicious visitors or the late-night phone calls. You just did your job and respected my privacy and made my home feel like an actual home instead of just a place I sleep. That's my job, Juliana said, but her voice was shaky. No, that's you being extraordinary at your job. There's a difference. He leaned forward. I'm not expecting you to decide anything tonight, or even next week, but I need you to know, whatever you decide, I respect it. If you want to walk away after my mother's dinner, you walk away, with your money and my protection and no hard feelings. But if you want to see if this could be real, I'd like that chance. Juliana looked at her, really looked at him, saw past the expensive clothes and the dangerous reputation to the man underneath, a man who'd lost his father and carried guilt for feeling relief, a man who'd inherited an empire and tried to make it less cruel, a man who'd spent months noticing her while respecting the boundary between them, a man who'd agreed to a fake marriage to help her prove her worth, not knowing that his mere presence would do exactly that. I want that chance, she heard her say. I'm terrified by it, and I don't know how we navigate the logistics, but I want it. Gabriel's expression transformed, relief and joy and something deeper washing over his features. Yeah, Juliana confirmed. But we do this carefully. No rushing, no pressure. We finish next week's dinner, officially end the fake marriage, and then, if we both still want this, we start fresh, as equals. As equals, Gabriel agreed. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. Can I kiss you? Is that professional? Juliana asked, but she was already leaning toward him. We're off the clock, Gabriel murmured, and I've been wanting to do this for months. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning. Then Juliana's hands fisted in his shirt and Gabriel's fingers slid into her hair, and it deepened into something that made her forget they were on a hotel balcony in Savannah. It was heat and promise, and the kind of connection that rewrote the rules of what she thought possible. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. Worth waiting for, he said. Definitely, Juliana agreed. They stayed on the balcony until nearly midnight, talking about everything and nothing, about art and books and the particular challenges of living in New York, about their childhoods and their fears and their hopes for futures that felt suddenly more possible. When they finally said goodnight and retreated to separate rooms, Juliana lay in bed with her fingers pressed to her lips, the ghost of Gabriel's kiss still warming her skin. She'd come to Savannah to prove her worth to an ex-boyfriend who'd never deserved her. Instead, she'd found something infinitely more valuable, the courage to believe she was worth wanting exactly as she was. and a man who'd apparently believed it all along. Tomorrow, they'd return to New York. Next week, she'd face Gabriel's mother and play the unsuitable wife one more time. But after that, they'd see if something built on a foundation of pretend could become something beautifully, terrifyingly real. Juliana fell asleep smiling, the ring still on her finger catching moonlight like a promise.